Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. Today, my guest is Lynn Sharer, past president of Bucks County Association of Realtors and broker of Quaint Oak Real Estate. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for having me back.
Great. Okay, so the last time you were on, we were talking about class action lawsuit, how the industry is going to change a little bit with commissions. And you said you would come back if anything changed. Well, the first shoe was dropped in Massachusetts. The MLS PIN settled for $3 million. But before we talk about that, tell me about the class action lawsuit commissions. Let's say I'm the first time ever hearing of this. Go ahead.
Okay. So first off, the last time I was here, of course, they weren't class action lawsuits. They've only recently become class action lawsuits. However, they were lawsuits, and they were between the defendant and NAR and several big name companies. And what really is on the line, there's a number of things that are on the line. The major thing that concerns me is buyer commission and buyer agency. The lawsuit is complaining that the buyer has no right to negotiate their commission. It's negotiated and given out by the seller.
Right.
So a lot of times in the past, buyer's agents said they work for free, which is not true, because at the table they would get a commission, but it would be from the seller. And what the whole thing is really the only person that brings money to the table is the buyer.
Right.
The buyer pays for everything. The buyer pays the seller's commission. Now the seller has a contract that says they will take some of that money and pay the seller's agent, their agent,
Right.
and then the buyer's agent. But the buyer cannot negotiate that at all. So that's a problem. And a lot of times, two things: they can't negotiate and they don't know. They don't know that they're actually paying a commission, and they don't know what the amount is.
Right.
And so basically what it is transparency. So, and the third thing is the NAR has a rule that the MLSs have to put a buyer commission in the listings. So the sellers, if you want to be in the MLS, the sellers have to agree to pay a commission.
Right.
Even if that commission is $1,
Right.
but they have to do that. So that's what the lawsuits are. And now, of course, we've moved on to where they're class action lawsuits. Right. So they're getting more and more force behind them.
Okay, so there's a couple of them, and then I want to jump really into the MLS PIN, because that just settled.
Right.
Okay, so you have in Missouri, Switzer, Burnett. That one's being heard in October, so that's the first one, and that's just in Missouri. So it's a class action lawsuit. It's kind of big, but not as big. The big one is the Morrell one. That's going to be spring of 2024, and that one covers over 20 different areas. We're talking about the NRA, RE/MAX, Keller Williams. I mean, everybody.
NAR.
Oh, NAR. I'm sorry. What did I say? Oh, NRA. Not the NRA. A lot of people would want the NRA, but no. NAR, RE/MAX, Rheology, over 20 MLSs. So that was a biggie.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. To 54 billion potentially as far as that. So these class and lawsuits aren't any joke. You have some serious law firms on both sides, like some big players on both sides going after it. Okay, so that's just setting up the table.
It looks like these lawsuits are going to change our industry dramatically.
Okay.
The way that we do business is going to change dramatically.
Okay.
Okay.
So now the MLS PIN, they settled for $3 million, and that's up in Massachusetts.
Right.
Right. So what does that do? You know, does it give like precedence that, hey, somebody already settled? And what did that lawsuit, say basically?
Okay. Well, first off, we have to put a disclaimer in here that.
Yeah, we're not attorneys.
Right. And neither one of us know what the hell's going on.
That's true too.
Okay. This is what we're hearing and understanding, and it could all change tomorrow.
Right.
Okay. But We have one lawsuit settled.
Right.
Can it be a precedent? Sure. Is it going to add impetus? Probably. Um, and on the heels of that, so what, that happened 10 days ago, maybe?
Right.
All right. So last Thursday, I had a meeting. The association had a meeting with Bright MLS, and Bright has now put out a new policy which goes into effect August 9th, which states that they are no longer, the MLS, Bright, which is the second largest MLS in the country,
Right.
is no longer going to require that listing agents put in commission for the buyer's agent if we do seller's sub-agent or transaction agents. So they are going to allow us to leave that at a zero.
Okay.
So now NAR has a rule that states that the MLS, the listing agents that work with MLSs, have to put in a buyer agent commission or a transaction agent commission. So even if it's $1, they have to put that in. Now, Bright is the second or third MLS in the country that has decided to break away from NAR and put zero
Right.
in. Now, Bright MLS is basically independent, but it is broker owned. It is not broker owned. It's association owned. So we're Bucks County is a shareholder. Tri-County is a shareholder. There's like, I don't know how many shareholders all around the country. So they're not totally independent of NAR, but they have decided that as of August 9th, and I think that, the timing is suspicious. So I think that they saw the writing on the wall because of what happened in Massachusetts.
Right.
And they're getting out in front of it. There's already an MLS in the Northwest.
Right.
And I'm not sure the name of it, but they've already been doing it for months, maybe 6 months, maybe longer than that. I'm not sure. And what's really interesting is the studies are showing that the commission given by the sellers hasn't changed much. I think the statistic that I read was like 96, 98% of the listings that are going into that MLS are still going in with buyer agency commissions in them.
Right.
So change in our industry happens very quickly and very slowly.
Right.
So everybody's kind of holding their breath and waiting to see what the hell happens.
Okay. So what it sounds like to me is if I'm representing a buyer, I definitely have to sign an agreement with that buyer that I'm getting paid.
Yes.
Whether, if this happens, whether they're paying me or the seller's paying me, somebody's paying me, you're going to have to get something in writing because there's no guarantee that the seller will do this. Most likely they will,
Correct.
But there's no guarantee, right?
Right. But it's my understanding that in Pennsylvania, and I can only speak in Pennsylvania, although I do have my Jersey license, but not quite as familiar as I am with Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, an agent is legally not allowed to be paid unless they have a contract prior to performing any services.
Okay.
So that's why when we do a listing, the first thing that we do is get a listing contract signed so we know we can get paid. We're not as diligent on the buyer side.
Okay.
Okay. And a lot of times the buyer agency contract, and I shouldn't be saying this, but it doesn't get signed until the agreement of sale. That's after you've shown all the houses and after you've done all the work. Now you're just sitting down writing the paperwork. It's imperative that we do it when the law states at the first substantive conversation.
Right.
When we get the consumer notice signed, we should get the buyer agency contract signed. And in the buyer agency contract, it says what your commission is going to be, just like in a listing contract.
Okay.
And a lot of the problem is
Well, let me ask you
that's
that question.
blank.
Okay, let me ask you that question. Right, because what happens if I do that in the very beginning? I don't know if the seller is giving 3%, 2.5%, 2%. You don't know what that is. So how would I fill that out on the buyer agency agreement?
I would fill it out. Personally, I fill it out for the amount of money that I think I'm worth. So whatever percentage that is.
$100,000?
Well, I try 10 and people will get upset about that, but
Right.
whatever. Okay. I put that in there now, and I can explain to my buyer that some of this will be paid by the seller. Then when I'm doing the closing costs and figuring out what I'm actually getting paid, I can choose.
Okay. Right. To take less or, yeah.
Right. So if it's not up to what I really want, and I'm looking at the closing cost sheet and I'm thinking this will be enough, or we can't afford this, or whatever, that's my choice. But if, let's just say that I put in my buyer's agency agreement that I was looking for 2.5% for my services, and the seller is only offering out 2%.
Right.
I can charge my buyer another 0.5% on the closing costs.
Okay, so it sounds like to me, if I'm representing a buyer, me as an agent, I have to really explain why you're potentially paying me. There's going to be a lot more conversation on the upfront saying, hey, this is why you're paying me. This is why I'm worth it.
Right.
Right.
This is the big problem.
That's the big change.
Yeah. The big change is buyer's agents never had to explain themselves.
Right.
The client would come and say, I want to see this particular house. And you said, okay, come on, and pretty much got paid. Okay. But now what we're trying to do is educate the consumer that they have a choice.
Right.
Just like when they're listing the house, they have a choice, between listing agent A, B, or C. It's not just you bump into an agent and the agent will show you the house. Showing the house is like the least thing that an agent can do.
Right.
Okay. And pretty much anybody can do it. Well, in Pennsylvania, you really have to have a license, but you don't need any knowledge to unlock the door and walk around a house.
And that's what you call, are you a realtor or are you a door opener?
Right.
So if you're a door opener, you're going to probably need to find a new job, because at this point, you're going to need to explain your worth and why you're getting paid, what you're doing to get paid.
Right. And you need to explain to them the process.
Right.
And how hard it is, especially right now, to get from looking at a house to owning the house, and all of the steps in between, and negotiating all the legalities and navigating that path, and doing it in a way that the buyer is protected.
Right.
And they're on all levels. So what happens when the home inspector comes back with a 200-page
report. It's a million different things.
What do you do?
Right.
So, and that's just one of them, making sure that the title is cleared. That's what the title company is there for, but it's always nice to have somebody read over it that understands what it is, and talking to them about, mortgages, loan officers, whatever's going on. Now, I never really get into specifics about mortgages, because my thing is there's as many mortgages out there as there are houses. So that's not my expertise, but guiding them to the mortgage loan officer that I know will give them a good job.
Right. Yeah,
that's part of my job.
Right.
Okay.
So if we're looking at, and there's differences. So if I'm looking in Bucks County, where somebody's buying $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 house, and the seller of that house says, I'm not paying a commission to the buyer's agent, which if everything goes through, they can say that.
Right.
And for what you said with the MLS, they can do it now.
Right.
Starting, August 9th or whatever the date was. Right. Those people, well, if they're paying a house like that, they can hire an attorney, they can hire an agent and pay them the $20,000, $30,000 to represent them. They can do that. But the first time home buyer,
Cannot.
They don't have the money.
No.
So that's where the rubber meets the road. Now, understand the seller can still opt to pay the buyer's agent, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can do that. And in certain areas, you're going to have that. So ultimately, there's going to be a couple things. It's going to be market condition. If there's 50 buyers for every house, well, guess what? Every seller may turn around and say, I'm not paying a commission to a buyer's agent. Ever. Because
That would be like the market we're in now.
right. Because there's 50 buyers for every house.
Right.
But now if there's, a bunch of houses for sale, 50 houses, and there's only one buyer, well, guess what? Every seller is going to turn around and say, hey, I'll give, whatever here, bonus
Seller
seller.
will be happy to do that.
Right.
The biggest problem here is that if the buyer agency commission is separated out from the sale price of the house, you can't finance it in.
Right.
We don't finance in general. We don't finance closing costs. We finance the sale price of the house, and then all of the closing costs get added on to that.
Right.
So if I'm, let's just say I'm charging a 5% buyer agency commission, that 5% is getting added on to the closing costs. So instead of $10,000, you may be paying $15,000 or $18,000. And that's a significant chunk of money.
Right.
And first-time home buyers, and I know when I bought my first house, I could barely afford a cup of coffee when I left the closing table. So
Right.
there is no money.
Right. Now, and the thing is now what they're talking about is, and once again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know the difference between NAR and the NRA,
Right.
obviously. So you can't go by me, but I know on the lower end where you have first-time home buyers, people who are strapped with cash, not that there's anything wrong with the lower end, but people who are just strapped with cash, not the second home, I don't know, I'm not flush with money, they're going to be up in arms. And I got to think that they will change the rules where you'll be able to finance the agent's fee. I think that has to happen. Or
I would hope so.
I would think.
And part of the problem is the first-time home buyers don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So if we're not telling them that, oh, this has changed or this is different, they're just going to assume that this is what it is. I mean, even today, there's a vast majority of people that think they need 20% down
Right.
to buy a house. And I mean, we have, even in this market, have 0% financing. Okay, it's not quite as common. FHA is 3.5%. So you
Right.
only need 3.5% down to buy a house. But those people that are doing the 0% financing and the 3.5%, they're like looking at what day on the calendar they can settle to save $35.
Right.
Closer to the end of the month, you pay less mortgage, insurance or interest. So it makes a big difference. So, an extra, $3,000-$4,000. That's going to be the difference between yes, I can and no, I can't.
Right. Without question.
So, and in this market, one of the other ways that you can do it is seller assist. I couldn't remember that. We haven't used those in a while. If you need a seller's assist in this market,
right. Well, your Bucks County market, because in Philadelphia, it's a little easier to do, but in Bucks County.
Not much, but you're still not, if the seller feels that they can get more money out of the house,
100%.
Then there's a buyer out there that's going to give them without the seller assist that much money. The seller assist is basically not being used because it's not competitive.
Right. Without question.
Not because they don't want to use it. It's because it's not competitive.
Right. And if you're a seller, you don't need to do it.
No. And if you need a seller's assist, the appraised price of the house has to include the seller's assist.
Right.
So it has to appraise for X 6% more than the asking price or the offer price of the next highest bidder. So it's really hard to do that right now. It's not happening just now.
Okay. So to sum everything up, we have October, a much bigger lawsuit, class action lawsuit, It's going to be heard. So we're going to find out what happens. We're going to see if anybody settles beforehand. The PIN, Massachusetts, that settled for $3 million, which was the first shoe to drop. And then we have the big boy in, or girl,
Yeah.
in the spring of 2024. I don't even think they'll get to that. I think the October one will probably solidify.
Well, I'm hearing though that the October one may be pushed off to February.
Oh,
So,
really? Okay. Okay.
it's still not,
Okay.
you know.
So definitely, if you're a real estate professional, it's something that you definitely want to be aware of and understand. Ultimately, I think the business isn't going to change, but it will change. Like ultimately, it won't change, but it will change. It'll just be change a little bit differently how you do things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you'll still have buyers agents getting paid. You'll still have seller agents getting paid. You'll just have to do things a little bit differently.
And you'll
You agree
still
with
have
that?
buyers.
Right.
And you still have buyer agency.
Right.
Is my feeling. Every time we have a big change in the industry, it's like the sky is falling and everybody's like running around like, oh my God, oh my God. I mean, I've been in the industry long enough to remember when buyer agency became buyer agency.
Right.
And that was a big deal. And people were like going, oh my God, how is this going to happen? And, the sellers the seller agents aren't going to be paid and the seller agents aren't going to exist. And, we're never going to get along. And within the year,
Everything worked out.
It was common practice, for you, even when Dodd-Frank came in and all
Right.
the big changes with the mortgage companies and the 3-day right of rescission and the
All that.
3
Yeah,
days,
everything. Yeah.
that was all. This will be the same thing. It will be a big deal, and there will be some changes. For right now, the thing that I would say for agents to get prepared for is read that buyer agency contract and fill it out completely.
Right.
Have these conversations with your buyers and let them know that, yes, they are paying a commission,
Right.
and this is how it's structured, and this is how it's done.
Okay, great. Okay, so Lynn, thanks for being on the show. And October, February, when the next shoe drops, we'll unravel with all our expertise. And
It'll be fascinating.
My lack of expertise, NRA, NAR, and National Rifle Association, everybody. We'll bring everybody in this the whole conversation,
There
right?
you go.
Okay. Once again, thanks for being on the show. And broker Quaint Oak, right?
Yep.
Real estate. If
Yep.
anybody wants to know about Quaint Oak Real Estate,
Right.
reach out, right?
That'd be great.
Perfect. Well, that's the Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. Be sure to follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, subscribe below, leave a comment. Super important. I want to hear your comments and what show topics you want to cover in the future. Remember, this show is everything real estate, no limits. Hope you enjoyed the show and talk.